I would just bury my emotions deep down and never have any preferences and never say anything ever until one day something triggered me and I would just explode. Can we boil that anger down and get to the root and see, okay, that actually is not anger, that's actually fear. Okay, what am I scared of? It's not your partner's responsibility. It's nobody else around you's responsibility to know what is happening in your body or in your mind. So if you press those emotions and you give them to somebody else, like, it's your fault that I'm angry, it's your fault that I popped off, or then you're becoming manipulative in your emotions, and it's not acceptable. Hello and welcome back to the More Please podcast. I'm your host, Bailey Amethyst, and this podcast is specifically made for us to find the best version of ourselves and hunt down our abundance. So we always start each episode off with a confession. So our confession for today is, I am not the best at regulating my emotions. Some people were just born with a little bit of extra fire inside of them, and I happen to be one of those people. Emotions have always been something that I feel like is a weak area for me. I have read all the books about managing my emotions. I've tried meditation, yoga, I'm going to see therapists, and I still to this day, I just don't feel like I've quite mastered the concept. Don't get me wrong, I've definitely come a long way, and I can see a huge difference in the way that I deal with situations, but I am by no means perfect, and I continuously have to remind myself to stay calm in situations where my emotions run high and are heightened. The first thing that comes to my mind is Ecclesiastes 7:9. Be not quick in your spirit to anger, for anger labels you a fool. I feel like growing up, my parents were always answering every question I had with the Bible verse. And if I'm going to be completely honest, it was a bit triggering, because if I had an issue with anything, they would just say, what does the word say about it? And because the Bible often speaks in riddles and parables, I would just be frustrated. So first, let me catch you up on all of the work that I've done so far. The emotion that I struggle with is actually not anger. It is anxiety that tends to show up as irritation. So then people also label me as angry. I am constantly on edge because I am an empath and I feel every emotion to the extreme, and I feel other people's emotions around me. So even though it might not seem like a big deal to other people, for me it usually feels similar to the world ending. So this often sends me into fight or flight mode, which is wrongly interpreted. And I have now identified my triggers, and I've done my best to eliminate as many as possible in my life, but I haven't been able to eliminate the root reason of why I'm even triggered in the first place. So for me, what usually happens is that I get overwhelmed, and some people might interpret that as irritation or anger, and then they start responding to my overwhelm as if I am attacking them, which makes me feel more alone, and I get kind of just like, I just shut down. So I've been working on for years actually communicating through my thoughts and my emotions, because nobody can read my mind, and I am aware of that. But sometimes it would be nice for people not to misinterpret my emotions all the time. So basically what I have been studying is emotional regulation. So this is how we manage and respond to our emotions. Research shows that people who are better at regulating their emotions tend to have lower levels of anxiety and depression. According to psychologist James Gross, there are two main types of strategies. Number one, it's antecedent focus strategies, which involves regulating your emotions before they fully develop. For example, reframing a negative situation positively or avoiding triggers because you know that they'll cause distress. And number two, response focused strategies, which means basically after the emotions have happened, you can use calming techniques to bring you back down, count to 10, deep breaths, and choosing how you express emotions in a healthy manner after you've been triggered. I actually didn't struggle with my emotions being so overwhelming until I got into like the general public. And I know that sounds crazy, but I grew up in a very like sweet and calm household. I felt very like safe and secure. And then when I started getting around different people and different personalities, I leaned into the people-pleasing aspects of myself, and I would just bury my emotions deep down and never have any preferences and never say anything ever, until one day something triggered me and I would just explode. And I quickly realized that's not a very healthy way to function in the world. So basically, I had to do a lot of learning around emotional set points. And for those of you that don't know what an emotional set point is, it is basically our scales of emotion. So there are plenty of emotions that we have, but from a scale, we usually start from love and then go up to fear. And you can label those and like happiness, joy, optimism, like the loving, excited, gratitude, all of these. And then on the fear side of our emotions, it's anxiety, hatred, violence, even just regular fear is here. And at any given point in our lives, in any given situation, we fall somewhere on the scale. So the reading that I've done has basically given me tools to be able to say, okay, where on the scale am I? Okay, if I look to the closest emotion on the scale that is leading me back to love, and I just take it one step at a time, that is putting me in a better place than I was when I was just angry. So instead of me being like, oh, I'm so angry, why can't I be happy and joyous right now? I say, okay, I'm angry, but can we boil that anger down and get to the root and see, okay, that actually is not anger, that's actually fear. Okay, what am I scared of? Okay, I'm scared of losing control right now. Okay, why do I feel that? Okay, because I have anxiety. And then I just work myself backwards on the scale until I can get to a point, even if it's not of happiness, it's of neutral, where I can say, hey, this is out of my control. I've done everything in my power to be able to express myself, or somebody is committed to misinterpreting me, and that is also not in my control. How can I come back to a place of peace? And I think that is just my main goal when it comes to controlling my emotions. So if you can work your way back, then at least you can get yourself into a safe space. So when it comes to antecedent response, I actually vividly remember, and this is maybe out of context for some people, but I remember in a situation where I was on a TV show and I could feel my body getting more and more angry, more and more betrayed, more and more overwhelmed. And I had a moment where I stopped myself and I'm like, don't react. Just stay calm, don't react. And then I said, ignore. And I just went full throttle. So as much as I would love to lean into stopping and regulating my emotions as they come up, I am just too much of a passionate person to be able to do that. It requires a lot of self-control. And I do feel like now, especially when it's a calmer situation, like if my husband and I are having a strong, passionate discussion, and I know that if I were to say what I'm thinking on the inside, even though I do think of it, I think petty things sometimes, or I think angry things sometimes just to get under people's skin. If I do that and I refuse to regulate my emotions, it's going to lead us to a bad place. So I decide to hold my tongue, which we all need to hold our tongue sometime, because we can feel in the moment that us reacting in the way that we're going to react is not going to be good for the situation. So I do suggest that one because it really has saved me from going into some pretty serious arguments, but it's not always possible. And that's where I want to say, like, people are on different sides of the scale. Say you're like socially anxious, right? Sometimes you cannot control those emotions in the moment. And I don't want anybody to make you feel bad for not being able to do that quite yet, or not being able to do that in every single situation. And you know what? Let's not even talk really quick on somebody holding us accountable for those. Let's just talk internal conversations with ourselves. Okay, I've already gotten further in my feelings than I want to get. So what can I do right now in this moment to take myself backwards? Okay, I can take a deep breath. I can say to the person that I'm arguing with, hey, I actually need a moment. I'm going to leave. Or I can say, you know what? I'm really, really uncomfortable. Just let me process my thoughts. You don't even have to leave the room. You can just sit there and you can process your thoughts. There's so many things that we can do and so many options that we can take, where I feel like when I was younger, I didn't know that I had these options. I just felt like I had to respond right now because somebody was expecting me to. But it's completely in my control. I can regulate my emotions and I can say, you know what? This doesn't feel good for me right now. Or even if it's like communicating, hey, I really care about you. I really want to give you an answer. But right now, if I respond, I'm not going to respond in a way that would be beneficial towards either of us. So can I please have time to process? And that has been life-changing for me. I like the fact that I can say, no, this doesn't work for me, or this just doesn't feel good. So I'm taking space. And then let's switch to if you're literally having an argument with somebody and they're going back and forth and pushing your buttons, like the response. Okay, you don't have to flip it on them, because one thing I will say is when I first started to control my emotions, the issue that I had was that I was manipulative in my emotions. And this is a whole nother thing, so we won't even go down to it. I knew how to trigger people. So I would be triggered, so I knew how to press people's buttons. So there would be times where my husband would want to discuss something. And instead of me just saying, hey, I need a moment, let me just walk out of the room, or hey, can we table this and come back, at 5 p.m. later, I would say something that would flip the script and trigger him so that the attention would be off of me. And I don't feel like that is a healthy way to deal with that either. I think that as adults, we have to grow and we have to learn our emotions are our responsibility. It's not your partner's responsibility. It's nobody else around you's responsibility to know what is happening in your body or in your mind. So if you press those emotions and you give them to somebody else, like, it's your fault that I'm angry, it's your fault that I popped off, or then you're becoming manipulative in your emotions, and it's not acceptable. So number one, we have to hold ourselves accountable for our own emotions. Number two, if we cannot stop ourselves from getting angry in the moment, then we have to make sure that we focus on our response within ourselves and without ourselves. If you did something and you said something that you're not proud of, it absolutely is your responsibility to go and apologize to somebody in the moment. Even if they triggered you, it doesn't matter. There's no excuse for disrupting or disrespecting people. And also, you have to forgive yourself. A lot of us have done things in our emotions that we're not proud of, and we know that we're wrong, and then we have continuously beat ourselves up for it over and over again. We hit ourselves over the head. But you can't be mad at yourself for doing something and continue to punish yourself. You'll never get past it. So it's more of a mixture of grace and communication and just learning that emotions are a part of being human. It's not something we can get around, but it is something that we can grow to control, grow to communicate through, and just grow to use for our benefit. Emotions are such a beautiful thing. I think they're a gift and they're triggers for us. So if we feel a certain way, it means that we can change. And if we want to change something, our emotions are leading us in the direction that will make us feel closer to love on that scale. So I don't know if you guys have read the book Return to Love by Marianne Williamson, but basically the concept of the book just says that as humans, there are two emotions. There's love and there's fear. And every single thing that we do is based out of love or based out of fear, which if you really boil down to it, it makes complete sense. But a lot of people don't know that they're responding out of fear when they do things. So they are in attack mode, or they're in fight or flight, or they feel like, wow, I'm justified to do this. But if you really think about where you're coming from when it comes to your emotions, and you check yourself and say, oh, actually, I was being petty because I am fearful of X, Y, and Z, where it's like, I'm fearful that my best friend will be taken away from me by another girl, so I was going to be petty to her. That's not based out of love, babe. Or I'm fearful that my man, will decide out of nowhere that he just is not in love with me anymore. So then I respond out of jealousy or insecurity, which is not out of love. So as humans, we just want to work our way back to love, returning to love, and doing the internal work that allows us to say, no matter what somebody else chooses to do with their emotions, I can always regulate mine. So I'm going to choose love every single time. And even if I fall short, I am going to do my best to work my way back to love. So our emotional set point is a concept that I got from the book Ask and It Is Given. And in the back of that book, there are exercises that you can do in order to manifest your dream life, which I frequently return to that book and I do a different exercise. But the emotional scale, our emotional set point, is basically our body, our higher power giving us clues on how we feel and if there is something that needs to change. Our emotions are what's telling us that it needs to change. So we have emotions ranging all the way from optimism, gratitude, ecstasy, and just happiness, all the way down to desperation, fear, violence, anger, jealousy, insecurity, and all of that. So on any given day, at any given time, you're somewhere along the scale, and it's up to you to figure out where you are and work your way back towards the positive emotions. The next time you feel a little overwhelmed or attacked or like your emotions are going to get the best of you, please try to stop, pause, take a deep breath, and don't give that control to anybody, your emotions are yours and yours only. But if we do get to the response focused strategy, make sure to give yourself grace because we are human and we are learning. So on that note, I just would like to thank you all for tuning in to another episode of More Please. We are growing and learning, and I hope that you're getting so much out of these episodes. I will see you next time.